couple more minutes for members of the committees as well as members of the public to file in. And we'll get started in just a few minutes. We'll wait about one more minute and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, we've got a quorum from both our committees, so we can go ahead and get started. Hi all, once again, you're at the March meeting of the Transportation and Environment Committee of Manhattan Community Board 5. I'm the chair of the committee, E.J. Kalafarski, alongside my vice chair, Sam Levy. The first item on our agenda tonight is an item that we'll hear in a joint committee meeting with the members of the Parks and Public Spaces Committee under its chair, Clayton Smith, and vice chair, Craig Slutzkin. The other three items on our agenda tonight will be heard exclusively by the Transportation Environment Committee. So one joint item followed by three items that are just our Transportation Environment Committee. For each item on the agenda tonight, we'll provide an opportunity for a presentation from the presenting organization or applicant, and then an opportunity for members of the committee to ask questions, and then an opportunity for members of the public to speak up with questions or comments on what they've seen. If necessary at that point for that particular item, the committee will go into a business session where the members of the committee will speak among themselves and determine any necessary course of action for any issue that demands it. I think that covers the logistics. And so with that, we'll get started with our first item of the evening, which is a presentation by the Union Square Partnership. Are our presenters with us tonight?
Yes, we are. Jen Falk from the Union Square Partnership, and I'm joined this evening by Ed Janoff, our Deputy Director.
Great. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'll just add that the first item we're hearing tonight is an update from the Union Square Partnership on their vision for Union Square. This, as was mentioned, is an item that'll be heard in joint committee between our T&E and Parks committees. I just want to note up front that while the partnership has been and continues to engage in a process like they're doing tonight of asking stakeholders and the community for input, and they'll correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that tonight is mostly an update and outreach to the community for input. The Union Square Partnership does not currently have any kind of action or application behind before a city agency, and there is currently no planned action or construction by any city agency, including Department of Transportation. So our understanding is that we're getting an update in a conceptual proposal and dialogue by Union Square Partnership tonight. Members of the public will get an opportunity to speak, but because there's no action before a city agency, we don't currently anticipate any kind of vote or official action on this tonight by Community Board 5. Obviously, we'll respond to information as it comes in, but I wanted to provide that framing tonight. And with that, I will turn things over to our presenters from the Union Square Partnership.
Oh, thank you, EJ. It's really a pleasure to be here with all of you and see all your faces. I'm excited for our in-person meetings, hopefully in the near future, as we get closer to all being vaccinated. So as I mentioned earlier, my name is Jennifer Falk. I'm the Executive Director of the Union Square Partnership. I am going to intro this presentation and then turn it over to my colleague, Ed Janoff, to get into the meat of our proposal. But I just want to kick off the discussion first by saying thank you for having us in this joint meeting this evening, and also to say that this product that we've produced, this document, is the result of 2 years of outreach and community engagement that we have done with our community partners to get to this point, but that it is a living document, and that what we are doing now that we've released this conceptual framework is continuing to go out to community partners like we are this evening with CB5, and continuing to use this as a jumping off point, a talking point for us to actually gather even more feedback. So our process started in the fall of 2018. We, over the course of the next year and a half, we had 2 community-wide forums. One was hosted at the 14th Street Y, the second was at Xavier High School. We did over a dozen pop-ups throughout the district, both in the Green Market, in the lobbies of residential buildings like Victoria and Secondorf Towers. We did an online community survey where we had over 350 respondents. And then we had smaller coffee clutch meetings at the offices of our architecture partner, Marvel. They used to be known as Marvel Architects, they're now Marvel, where we continue to gather input from high-level stakeholders. And I think we may have also had some off like not committee meeting conversations with some of the representatives from Community Board 5. I sorry, I'm having a little bit of a pandemic brain. But I think that I met maybe possibly with Craig and EJ at some point, and we talked about this, but you'll have to jog my memory if I got that right. Anyway, so we launched in January with an incredible forum hosted in partnership with the Urban Design Forum. And then we also had a wonderful news story in the Wall Street Journal. And then since then, we have had what we're calling community conversations. And these are smaller coffee clutch type meetings where we have no more than 20 or 25 people. We've hosted about a half dozen of them so far. And we meet with, I will say most of the people who've RSVP'd for these meetings have been residents, which we're really pleased about. And we've gathered all of that feedback into an ongoing memo that we're keeping on all the feedback that we're getting on the plan. I think from now until, say, the end of the calendar year, with God willing a new administration in January of 2022, our plan is to have something that is fully baked and ready to share with our partners at City Hall, as well as the relevant city agencies, with a new mayoral administration and hopefully kick off one of the 5 signature projects that I will let Ed, my colleague, review with you in more detail. And with that, I will pass it on to you, Ed.
There we go. Thank you, Jen. And thank you to the members of Community Board 5 for having us tonight. Before I get into the details of this particular project, I just want to say that, I mean, I think most of the people at Community Board 5 should know who Union Square Partnership is and what we do, but just as a quick refresher, we are the local business improvement district at 14th Street and surrounding Union Square Park. We provide services like sanitation, tables and chairs, park maintenance, park programming, and in addition, capital projects, most recently shown on the right here, between 2008 and 2010, it was the reconstruction of the Park Pavilion and the North Plaza of the park. This is all the kind of work that we do routinely. I don't need to orient anybody at this meeting, I think, to where Union Square is, but I show this slide to say that, you know, in diving into this vision project with Marvel, we really approached Union Square with a very strong deference for the sanctity of this space. It has this incredible history and legacy. We did not try to reimagine Union Square as something different than it is. We know that it's a place that everyone has been to, everyone has memories of. There's New Yorkers of all walks of life come through here, and that is just something that we wanted to enhance. This is the boundaries of our district for the bid, just for your edification. We go from 1st Avenue to 6th Avenue. And as I said, the properties around the park, these are our direct bid members. And then we also are an LDC, which is shown in light blue. Those are the boundaries of the Local Development Corporation. That is functionally our core service area, although we recognize that Union Square is you know, a place where people come from all around. So having done this presentation 4 or 5 times before, I'm going to try to move through the design work fairly quickly and leave more time at the end for questions. But of course, if there are details here you want to discuss about the design, more than happy to do so. Briefly, before COVID hit, I think Union Square was a neighborhood that was on a really strong, positive trajectory. Pedestrian foot traffic was near all-time highs. Mass transit use was near all-time highs. City bike ridership doubling year over year, just really, really bustling area. And one of the things we think that makes Union Square such a unique place when it comes to sort of the vibe on the street is that it's one of New York City's really true mixed use neighborhoods with a 2-to-1 ratio of workers to residents. You have, you know, the residential community providing a core of activity, and then you have office workers coming in, you know, doing their daily commuting, and then you have, you know, New Yorkers from all over who are shopping, meeting up, etc. Really gives it this New Yorkers New York feel that is special in Union Square. If you go a little bit south to the Village, much more residential. You go a little bit north further into Midtown, much more office workers. But here there's really some unique character to the street life. There's also been a lot of development on the way in Union Square, a lot of private sector investment, some really noteworthy projects, including Target slated to come into the Food Emporium space at Secondorf Towers. The Tech Center at Zero Irving, supposed to open later this year. And the recent renovation of the Tammany Hall building at the northeast corner of the park, and a lot of other mixed-use projects throughout the neighborhood. As Jen said, this was the most robust engagement effort in the 45-year history of Union Square Partnership. We did these community forums, we did these pop-up events, really trying to meet people where they are in the neighborhood, in the street. You see a photo here of us in the Green Market. We were, you know, at subway entrances, in bus stops, in hotel lobbies, really trying to get the feedback from people of all different stripes here in Union Square. And of course, the online survey. So well over thousands of engagements here fed into the visioning work. I'm not going to go through every single thing that we heard, but just some of the high level feedback. First of all, we heard people love Union Square and they want to see more of what's good about it, which is just always just good to hear that. Maybe sort of obvious. Also, this was our engagement was happening during the period of time of the conversations about the L train shutdown and the idea of a busway, and so there's a lot of feedback about transportation in particular and concern about availability of transit and kind of connectivity between transit and safety in the pedestrian environment. We also heard that a lot of people were interested in seeing more greening and more greenery throughout the Union Square neighborhood. And when it came to the park, we heard that a lot of people said, there's been work recently and upgrades recently on the north side of the park and the west side of the park and the south side of the park, but not the east side, that perhaps the east side feels a little bit neglected and needs some more attention. So these were some of the kind of top level ideas that went into the visioning work. Another thing that the design team thought a lot about was the nexus of the city investments in Broadway as a pedestrian thoroughfare and in 14th Street as a surface transit thoroughfare. How does the intersection of these two corridors, how do we make them connect and how do we leverage their intersection in the public space of Union Square to make it work better? Also, we thought a lot about the current administration's Parks Without Borders principles and how we might relate that to the design of Union Square. So we articulated this vision statement that we think encapsulates some of this feedback and some of these ideas. And the thrust here is really to make Union Square as inclusive as possible and as accessible as possible. And that means accessible both in the sort of more literal design sense of being a place that is easy to navigate for people of all ages and abilities, and in wheelchairs and in strollers, and then also a place that provides access to the fundamental features of the neighborhood, provides access to food, access to education, access to healthcare, access to each other, access to New Yorkers. How can the design of the public realm provide that kind of accessibility? We put together these soft goals for the plan. And some of these, if you're used to seeing streetscape plans, some of these you'll see a lot of the time, in any neighborhood, increasing pedestrian space, improving access and connectivity, more greenery and open space, historic preservation. But some of these goals I think are really specific to Union Square. One is honoring the legacy of the site as a continued place for demonstration and free expression. And second is sustaining the sort of impromptu and organic activities that happen in Union Square that contribute to that really authentic New York flavor that you feel when you're in the space. And finally, one of the things that fed into the thinking behind the design work was looking at the kind of trajectory of the development of the public space of Union Square throughout its history over the centuries. First as a kind of oasis built in the 1830s, which was then redesigned in the late 19th century by Olmsted and Fox, the designers of Central Park, to be this kind of gated bucolic space with meandering pathways, as is their signature. And then around that time, the neighborhood really starts to build up around the park with, clanging trolleyaways and skyscrapers, and becomes very bustling. And then you have the arrival of the automobile. And then in the Moses era, it gets kind of master planned again, more like a traffic circle, and the kind of statue areas at the southeast and southwest corner turn into these sort of traffic islands to divide all the traffic that's now around the square itself. And it stays very much that way until the 70s, when you have the arrival of the Green Market, which for the first time starts to use what was a lot of now parking around the park as public space. And that kicks off a series of master plans in the 80s and 90s that start to build out the Union Square that we may recognize today, including the elevation of the park over the subway underneath, and thus the creation of the South Plaza steps and this special viewing area here, building out the Triangle Park, the Gandhi Gardens, and then eventually the north side and the west side, which was the project that Union Square helped to spearhead up through 2008 to 2010. And in the last decade or so, you've seen a lot of development in these kind of temporary projects on the streets around the square, where you've got an additional plaza at 17th Street, bike lanes, pedestrian areas, shared streets, and what we see is continuing that into the pedestrianization of the space as a whole. So, did I skip a slide here? No, we took it out. So we asked Marvel, our design team, to come up with a series of distinctive projects so that we could have, just to help us organize our thoughts into how we would represent these ideas and how we might actually go about fundraising and building them. And so the 5 distinct projects that I'm going to walk you through here are: first, Union Square West; second, the Broadway Plaza and 17th Street area; third is a 14th Street Boulevard, really not just in Union Square, but continuing east and west throughout the neighborhood. Fourth is the Triangle Park and sort of Union Square East as it connects to the Triangle Park. And then fifth is the park interior. So I start on Union Square West, and I start here because the design ideas for Union Square West reflect a transformation that is representative of the concepts for Union Square as a whole. And what you see here in this current sort of before picture, if you look at the paving, what I find interesting here is that you see almost every kind of standard paving that exists in New York City. From on the left, you've got like a regular concrete sidewalk, then you've got this historic granite slab sidewalk, then you've got an asphalt bike lane that's coming through here. You've got a cobblestone roadway. You've got a granite block curb, square asphalt pavers, bluestone block pavers, and then finally the standard park hexagonal paver. You also have these concrete blocks that were dropped, for NYPD counter-terror to protect pedestrians, and you have temporary DOT movable planters to create, a pedestrianized environment here. All of this is to say, a lot of kind of incremental and temporary improvements have been happening around the square that have resulted over the last few decades in sort of a cacophony of disintegrated design ideas. And so the thrust of this vision on the whole is to really formalize all of the temporary projects that have been implemented around the square into one coherent and harmonious idea, so that the entire room of Union Square, from building to building, feels like one inviting, walkable space. So as I go to the after here, what's shown is a continuous paving treatment from one side of the street to the other, all the way from the park to the building edge, and a traversable pedestrian environment that's all at pedestrian grade, integrating potentially a two-way sort of local access bikeway, additional active retail on the ground floor, potentially new cafe space, more trees along the street and along the park. And we're introducing a concept here that Marvel came up with of a raised planter bench that could allow for additional plantings, flowers or trees, and integrate seating in a way that just provides more opportunities to sit and people watch than there are today. Also showing the potential for some kind of upgraded infrastructure at the Green Market to provide, a more consistent look, and maybe a way to not have the line of refrigeration trucks parked sort of blocking the vistas during green market days. The space would essentially function the same as it does today. Union Square West would continue to be open to vehicles between 15th and 16th, with the edges of the roadway delineated by bollards to protect the pedestrian space. And these bollards would be operable in some manner, TBD, to allow for emergency vehicle access, building maintenance access, etc. A detail to be worked out. Overall, a much more plantings and more pedestrian accessibility throughout the space. Here we are in a plan view and an aerial view. Just so you can orient, this is between 15th and 16th on Union Square West. And one important feature that you can see a little bit better here is that by making all of the space from the park side to the building line at pedestrian grade and increasing the amount of usable pedestrian space, we make a little bit of room here to show what we are calling for would be an expanded subway entrance at 16th Street to the Union Square station. We're calling for an escalator and an elevator and a canopy here. This is just one example shown down at the South Street Seaport. Doesn't have to be this design, but the idea is, the Union Square station is the 4th busiest subway station in the system. It's only got one escalator and elevator all the way at the far southeast corner. This could provide an additional escalator and elevator at the northwest corner for access to the park, the green market, and points to the northwest. Moving around to the north side of the park here at Broadway and 17th Street, facing south. This is the DOT Plaza that was built in 2010, and it's going to be the same theme as what I showed you for Union Square West. Here you've got these temporary blocks and planters and this painted gravel. The concept for the future would be to design this space as fully integrated with the park so that the paving treatments are consistent, the pedestrian space is protected with some kind of an elegant bollard treatment, and again, showing the introduction potentially of this raised element that allows for above ground plantings and integrated seating and mixed styles of seating for mixed uses. You also see in the background, 17th Street continues to move through as a shared street type of space, lower speed, lower volume. And in the background, you're seeing this kind of flexible market infrastructure and the concept of a subway entrance here. Again, does not have to be that style, but the renderer is just borrowed from the 2nd Avenue subway. In plan view and in axon view, really, again, showing that trying to make this a permeable pedestrian space. People like to cross between the Green Market and Barnes & Noble today, but trying to formalize that and connecting to DOT's Broadway visioning of a pedestrian corridor coming all the way down from Columbus Circle, being welcomed into this gateway to Union Square here, where the design starts to unify with the park. And it also continues this local access kind of bike facility down Union Square West and around the park as it does today. Next, I'm going to show you an aerial view of 14th Street facing west at Broadway and the South Plaza of Union Square. The concept on this side is the same, although it's, I think, a much bigger change when you look at it from the aerial view. The concept is basically the same, unified paving from the park side all the way to the building edge, so that Union Square throughout feels like one continuous space, all at pedestrian grade, with the roadways delineated with pedestrian protection. 14th Street remaining a busway and a local access route. You see, we heard in the feedback that people in the community were interested in having sort of the open space benefits and greenery of Union Square be extended out to the neighborhood, and the design team took that idea quite literally, extending these radial elements of the South Plaza of the square, kind of blasting them out into the neighborhood so that this whole space feels like the South Plaza. And even in this concept, taking this planter bench idea and kind of curving it to mirror the curve of the South Plaza steps. so that this all looks like sort of one South Plaza with a vehicle space moving through it. This also allows for doubling the sidewalk width on the south side of 14th Street, relieving a lot of the congestion around the subway entrances and providing opportunities for activated ground floor retail. Also doubles the sidewalk width on the north side of 14th Street, just to provide more gathering space, more social distancing space, and more room for pedestrians to alleviate congestion. This is going to bring you down onto 14th Street to show some of these concepts in more detail. This is 14th Street facing west from eye level. And here you can see the unified paving scheme across the street with the radials pulled out. The busway here, in this view, you can see that the raised planters can double as a pedestrian protection. So you don't have just bollards here, but you can have integrated bollards and planters. Here you can see the wider sidewalk, potentially activated ground floor retail, and overall this continuous feeling of being in Union Square on both sides of the street. Here it is, the 14th Street part in plan view and an axon view, and showing the idea that potentially this paving scheme could continue down the shared street of University Place as well. And then finally, I'm going to show a concept for the Triangle Park, which is at the southeast corner of the park at 14th Street and 4th Avenue. And this was one of the spaces that we really universally heard from the community needed to be improved and maybe rethought. So this was really the one part of Union Square that the design team took a crack at kind of really reimagining in some way. And what they noted was that, it's a space that has, not really very good circulation. It's got narrow pathways, poor sight lines. It doesn't have good drainage. It doesn't have irrigation. It's kind of a dust bowl. And it doesn't really honor the way people maybe want to walk directly to Union Square. Excuse me. So the concept was, and you can see, I'll use in the before after, you can use this tree here as a kind of marker for where you are in the before and the after. The idea was to open up the plaza space to through movement going directly into Union Square. So from 4th Avenue and 14th Street, you'd now be able to move northeast through the park, and we would provide more different types of seating, seating not facing to the interior, but maybe a mix of seating facing both interior and exterior, and seat walls, benches, movable seating, all different types of seating, and a lot more circulation space and a lot more pedestrian access throughout. This is again in plan view and in axonometric. If you didn't catch it in the earlier renderings, what's really important to understand here is that the concept here, the high level concept, is to unify the Triangle Park with the rest of Union Square and to join it physically to the South Plaza. That necessitates somehow diminishing or potentially eliminating the southbound traffic on Park Avenue. That is an idea that is really requires further study, but it is, I think, the leading sort of inspiration from the design team saying this as a public space might function best if it was directly connected to the park, with the caveat that that's something that needs a lot more study and could have a lot of different ways that it could function. But it was rendered for the purposes of nice renderings, shown as one contiguous public space. The last significant project of the 5 was park infrastructure. This is not something that we rendered. The idea is not to do anything dramatically different for the interior of Union Square Park, but just to say that it has not been master planned in over 40 years, and that a lot of the park infrastructure is now aging out as it is 30 to 40 years old. And so this is sort of a catch-all aspiration in our vision plan, saying that the park needs to be renovated. It's sort of a laundry list of needs, The trees, the 75 to 150-year-old trees, in many cases are aging, and we need to come up with a plan to preserve them, but also to have a succession plan for when they do eventually die off. Renovating subway entrances, landscaping, a dog run, the plumbing is starting to fail, the electrical is starting to fail. A lot of work that needs to be done in the park as a whole. Probably that would be combined with upgrades to the subway as well. Lastly, so not one of the 5 major projects, but a totally separate idea, the designers proposed a streetscape toolkit. So this is more of individual street furniture elements that could be deployed throughout the neighborhood, not just around Union Square, not just on 14th Street, but all throughout the BID and LDC service area. The probably first and foremost is outdoor seating. This is something that really became evident how important it is in the pandemic. A lot of this planning work started before the pandemic and then had to be reevaluated throughout and to make sure that everything that we were proposing continued to make sense. And I think outdoor seating is one area that really is of critical importance. And so, we heard a lot that the South Plaza of Union Square is this really incredible people watching space in New York City. And how can we just provide more seating throughout the neighborhood? Because it's just, on a nice day, Union Square is just jammed. You cannot find a seat, and people would like to. So we're really looking at a diverse array of different seating types, different seating places throughout the neighborhood, and including, pop-up seating and even cafe seating wherever we can get it. So the main seating type that is novel that this design team came up with was this idea of the planter bench that I've been coming up with, or that I've been mentioning. They really, again, it was a literal interpretation of, the South Plaza and this great people watching opportunity. How could you replicate that throughout the neighborhood? Maybe you could do it on a smaller scale by having, this type of seating along 14th Street or in other places throughout the district. Here it's shown in section, possibly angled. Again, could have trees or flowers. And also, trying to leverage DOT's Street Seats program, not just at food service locations, but, where could we install these as a BID where we could maintain them, just to provide additional public space opportunities and maybe relieve some pedestrian congestion. And they showed this idea, if we could install one of these at a place where we've also been building elevated tree benches or planter benches, if you put one that's in between 2 trees, now you create this kind of little micro park that you could put really throughout the neighborhood. Something we are excited to explore. Other ideas in the streetscape section of our vision plan. Marvel was one of the design firms that responded to the city DOT and sanitation's request for expressions of interest for some kind of a prototype for a waste container that would collect trash from multiple establishments and put it in a container that's in the parking lane that gets it off of the sidewalk and out of the pedestrian's way, and cuts down on vermin and leakage, and tries to put it in a place where the carter can come and access it from the back. So that is something we'd like to explore with Marvel. I think the security features I mentioned, but the idea was that all of the pedestrian realm around Union Square would have some kind of elements to protect the pedestrian realm that would improve upon the granite blocks that are all around there today. And in certain points, these would be operable to allow access as needed. Also, lighting is a key part of this, to come up with a lighting plan for the streetscape, mainly to really try to replicate the historic Bishop's Crook that you see all along 14th Street, bring that throughout the area. Also upgrade all the park lighting to LED. Looking at facade lighting, there are many beautiful facades around Union Square, but few of them have decorative lighting, and that could be a really dramatic improvement for the neighborhood. And also looking at introducing moonlighting from the tops, from the roofs of buildings down into the park. You see it here in Bryant Park. That could be a way to provide a nice wash or glow of color on the public spaces around the square for upgraded security. And finally, I should mention here, public art is already something that Union Square Partnership does and tries to cultivate in partnership with Parks Department and DOT. We see a lot of artwork here, sometimes at the Triangle or at the Plaza and 17th Street and Broadway. That's something we would like to continue and look for enhanced opportunities to do that in an expanded pedestrian areas at the Triangle, Union Square West, and on Broadway. So finally, implementation and next steps. At the back of our plan, there's a matrix of all the projects that lists them categorizes them in terms of their priority, how expensive they'll be, how much time they'll take, how complicated they are, and also which of our goals they hit. It's just a tool for us to help organize our thoughts about how we want to move forward with all of these different ideas. There's also a very rough funding plan in the back. You know, all of this work, including the subway work, could cost upwards of $100 million. That's a ton of money, especially in the current fiscal environment. As a bid, part of our role is to be a steward for the neighborhood to continue this kind of thinking and continue investment, even when the city might be financially strapped. So we will continue to use our funds to advance some of this design work, maybe to implement some of these short-term projects like the street seats or tree planting, things that we can do sort of more quickly. We'll also look at the potential for private fundraising or debt financing, different ways that we can leverage our assessment to front load more work so that we can do some of this building ourselves potentially. You know, the partnership raised $8 million of the $20 million for the reconstruction of the north side of the park. So we will look at, again, asking the private sector potentially to donate money for some park features. But lastly, we are cognizant of the fact that this will require plenty of investment from city, state, and federal funding. So we will go out and ask for that. And we are in the process of working with an economic development consultant to really put more meat on the bones of this high-level funding plan to make detailed estimates as we go out and raise money in the years ahead. So this is the rough timeline, and I should point out, not the timeline for execution of all this work, just for the timeline of rolling out the vision itself, just introducing the plan to our community. All this work could take 10 or 20 or 30 years. It's a very long timeline. Again, we're just at the start, just at the inspiration phase. And so it's really important for me to note, if you don't, take away anything else, understand that none of this is happening tomorrow. There are no bulldozers and backhoes showing up. Of that $100 million, the number of millions we have today is 0 millions. Between 0 and 1 millions, we've got a lot of fundraising to do, a lot of outreach to do, and then a lot of design work to do. But right now, we are in the process of providing detailed updates like you see today on what the concepts here in this vision plan. And we want to gather feedback to hear, what are the things that people are excited about? What are your concerns? What do we need to think about as we move forward with our prioritization and project delivery? As Jen referenced in the beginning, we've already done 4 of these community conversations. These were public meetings where we invited, residents and office workers and different stakeholders from the community to come and give us some feedback. We had 60 people attend the 4 meetings. We really tried intentionally to make them smaller meetings so that we could have, one-on-one conversations with people. And we asked people to follow up with a survey. We got, I think, about 30 or so survey responses. So the feedback is already starting to come in. We've heard people really like the the ambitious boldness of the plan and how it's kind of putting Union Square in the context of some of the great spaces of the world. And everyone appreciated the open space and greenery. We've heard a lot of high marks for the concept of getting trash off the sidewalk, and just in general for the thoughtfulness of the design and engagement. So far, some of the concerns we've heard are really how does this plan, how does vending work in the future of Union Square, something that the design kind of doesn't really prescribe, but only sort of accommodates. A lot of concerns about, how is the traffic going to work? How are pedestrians and bicyclists going to navigate each other in the future? Also, folks wanting us to see adding more resiliency, more greenery, more stormwater capture. How can this plan be, more sustainable? Thinking about the, how this impacts existing uses, and then finally, as always in Manhattan, noise and congestion impacts. So these are the things that we'll be thinking about as we start to develop some of these high-level concepts into ideas moving forward. So I wanted to go faster than half an hour, but that's the plan in a nutshell. And so I will stop now, and Jen and I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed and Jen. That was very comprehensive, and I think also did a good job at letting us know what we were looking at, which is, an aspirational 10 or 20-year plan, and what your intentions are in the short term, and then in the very, very long term. So I think that's very helpful context. Thank you. With that, I'll first invite members of either of our committees from CB5 who are in attendance tonight to feel free to ask any questions that you might have. You please use the raise hand feature in Zoom, as is our custom. Clayton.
Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. And thank you so much for the presentation. It's great to see you. I just wanted to bring up some top line questions that are relevant to our committee. I'm going to leave it to Transportation Committee members to address questions regarding those topics. But I just wanted to highlight, and these are not questions I would ask you to even answer right now unless you have a response that makes sense. I know this is long-term thinking and that a lot of this granular work is way ahead of us. But generally speaking, as you know, one of the big concerns that we always have on the Parks and Public Spaces Committee is the jurisdictional issues. So some guidance to us as we move forward with this, as you move forward with this process, as far as with that uniform pavement, which generally speaking seems like a very inspired and overdue idea, does result in some confusion around DOT, SAPO, you guys, and on and on. And those jurisdictional issues are always kind of thorny with the park and the sidewalks and the perimeter sidewalks and the street and the roadbed and sidewalk cafes and all of that. So with a uniform pavement, how those jurisdictional differences would still be delineated, how we would know what to expect, how operators know what to expect, and how enforcement would be kind of adjudicated accordingly. That's one big question. A second one is about the bollards. This is a real pet peeve of mine, it's an extremely difficult topic because the bollards, of course, we're all very concerned about security. However, the city has been confusing about hamstringing certain entities around requiring bollards, but who's going to pay for them? And so one thing that I'd want to make sure that we are able to review and see in the future is renderings about what scenarios of bollards we might be talking about. The removable ones, what does that mean? Are they the ones that sink into the ground? Are they, what are they? And the permanent ones, which are more concerning, what do they look like? The fancy ones that might not end up being in the budget, what do those look like versus what do the more affordable ones look like that are uglier? Just knowing what that is, knowing the price tag for it, and knowing who's going to pay for it, I think is going to be a really important part of this project overall, because it can be so prohibitive. And if they're all super ugly and permanent, can really be at the detriment of all the visionary work that you're trying to do. So that's a big question. And then the third one, which is smaller, the moonlighting thing. I would be really careful about that. Boy, that really rubbed me as like, I don't know, prison lighting. Let's light up the neighborhood and make sure everybody's safe. Like, great public safety, yes, but there's got to be some lighting solutions that aren't from the top of a building or something. I don't know if Bryant Park is necessarily something you want to emulate in that regard. That's all I'll say for now.
Thanks, Clayton. Ed and Jen, I don't know if you just sort of want to jot those down for now, or whether you have an immediate response to.
I would say thank you. I've definitely been taking lots of notes. And these are definitely issues that we're also thinking about as well. I will just say with regard to the bollards, anytime we were able to pick a city standard to depict in a rendering, we picked a city standard, and just in order for graphic design purposes. But we completely hear you on the need to figure out like what these bollards are going to look like and how they're going to function. And those will all be details that we work out. We hear the feedback on mood lighting, and then the jurisdictional issues. We've thought about that. It could be something that we solve with 2 tones of a paver, lots of details to work out, but we've definitely, I've got all my notes. So I want to get through everyone's comments and questions, but know that we've got it.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thanks. Next up, Sarah Dowson.
Yes, I mentioned this at your last presentation. Bike lanes. I ride a bicycle, and I'm not a fast rider, but all I saw in this presentation was a couple of bicycles meandering amid pedestrians and people, a man in a wheelchair. I think you need a bike lane for fast bike riders, like next to the bus lane maybe, and then other places for bicycles to go slowly and carefully. That's all.
That is an excellent point. Thank you for bringing it up again, Sarah. I will say, as simply as possible, I think one of the things we want to do with this long-term plan is to address how the bike network actually was implemented within the Union Square area and rationalize it. There were some decisions that were made that clearly, for example, it's not the city's preference to put bike lanes on 14th Street, but clearly we know everyone's biking on 14th Street anyway. What we've heard in a lot of our community conversations from the resident population is that they really don't like that northwest bike lane on the east side of the park, and that it's not intuitive when you're crossing the street to look both ways when the traffic is coming southbound. So these are things that we want to address in a comprehensive plan for the district and improve.
Thank you, Jen.
Next up, Todd Shapiro.
Hi there. I'd like to commend the bid for having this 30-year vision and presenting it so effectively. My question is, $100 million, 30 years, these 5 different components, what is the priority for these things, right? I mean, the bid has tremendous expertise and experience on all of these things, but they're going to have to pick and choose very carefully on which ones move forward based on funding, based on what has to be done quickly, and then do its best to marshal the efforts of the community. Can you give us any indication about which ones that you're going to prioritize?
Jen, you want me to take that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I'd focus on infrastructure.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think we're looking at balancing what's easy to do quickly or inexpensively, what's urgent, and what has the best opportunities for outside funding sources. So what's most fundable. So the partnership will be advancing streetscape as quickly as we can. These are street furniture elements, things like street lights, trees, parklets. We're going to be launching right away into trying to do more of the street seats this year. We'll be launching right away into doing a tree study for Union Square. We're going to try to look at prototyping the waste container maybe next year. Those are some of the early action items. Infrastructure is going to drive a lot of this work. You've got aging pipes under the ground, you've got failing subsurface infrastructure in the park, and then you've got potential renovation needs for the Union Square subway station. Not to mention, we're pushing for the Union Square subway station to be made more accessible but more accessible. It's not even accessible today. The 456 train doesn't even have an elevator down to the platform. It's really kind of an antique subway station down there. You know, if you're talking about trying to do platform work on the Lex, you know, that's going to be way more complicated and expensive than, at that point, the street work just becomes like icing on the cake. It's small potatoes compared to everything else. So I think we really are going to try to push these infrastructure conversations as a way to drive funding. And that, I think, will necessarily mean that the 14th Street work and the kind of Triangle Park work are more likely to be prioritized. However, they're also more likely to be expensive and time consuming. Union Square West is a little more straightforward. So we're just going to kind of see how we get responses from the state and federal level in terms of which goes first.
Thanks, Ed.
Yeah.
Next up is Barbara Spandorf.
Hi, I'm a member of the Parks Committee, so I'm going to address sort of a park aspect. I really like the incorporation of the Triangle Park, because it always seemed like such a waste. It's kind of marooned by the traffic patterns, but there's a lot of hardscape. You know, there is maybe not very successful greenery right now, but it is green. Was there any thought to provide a little more greenery? Even beyond, you know, to make it a little more park-like, beyond the planting. I mean, that would be really my only comment about it, but I definitely think, you know, it's a really its location makes it difficult to really use, you know, except for when you're trying to cross streets and stuff like that, so.
So one thing, I'm going to go back to this aerial rendering. A couple of things I want to mention. First is, I don't think I said this, but the reason that Marvel came up with this idea for an elevated planter was not just because it, you know, looks slick or has seating, but because the subsurface conditions here make it really difficult to plant and for the things that get planted to survive. Okay, you look at the trees on Union Square West and on 17th Street that have been planted in the last 10 or 15 years. We're seeing a lot of failures. You're getting truck strikes, you're getting dog urine, roadway salt, even heat from the subway station and steam lines killing the trees. So we want to get them elevated in a protected environment. This is also, if you pitch the, you know, if you grade the paving properly, these could also be stormwater capturing elements. Also, I want to point out, if you see in this rendering, none of these are trees. These could all be trees. The only reason we're not showing trees is because it was kind of obscure what's happening in terms of the kind of circulation. And so there's areas throughout the vision plan where the designers made the choice not to show trees just so that they could show the architecture. But all of these could potentially be trees. And we've heard in the community conversations and from the Parks Department, people want to see as many trees as possible.
Yeah.
The designers also felt like, they felt like some of that thrust that I was showing in the beginning about the historic evolution of Union Square was that this is a gathering space and sort of a precious, rare, hardscape open space in Union Square, in New York City. Most of the open spaces in New York City are designed as parks where you have sort of pathways and green spaces, not that many large gathering spaces central to the city. So their instinct was to preserve that and expand that. However, we are hearing a lot of feedback that people are saying we'd like to see more greenery in the future, especially around the triangle. So I think that's exactly the kind of thing that, as we move from vision concepts into, preliminary designs down the road, that we could start to incorporate.
Great, thank you.
Next up, Sam Levy.
Thanks, EJ. You kind of addressed this, I think, in another question from Todd, but I'm just curious. You mentioned that you would be engaging in public space activations coming this summer. Could you just clarify what those public space activations starting in summer 2021 are?
Ed, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I don't want to give anything away.
Well, we're going to have to come back and show them everything. That's the thing.
All right. Well, we are, the busway created some pedestrian areas along 14th Street between University Place and 4th Avenue. There's just kind of tan gravel spaces that you saw in the before areas. Those are meant to be pedestrian, but they're not really being used by pedestrians because it doesn't really feel like an inviting walking space or a public space. And a lot of times you just see e-bikes zipping through them. So one of the things we're going to try to do is try to take those gravel areas along 14th Street and enhance them with public space, design improvements or amenities, TBD, that we will be coming back to you with. That is a way of starting to kind of exert the concept of the vision of creating more public space along the streets around the square and adding it, giving it a unified look. So we'll, that space will look like the public seating areas in the park, will look like the public seating areas in at the plaza at 17th Street and Broadway. In addition, the street seats, which are those seating areas that are in the parking lane, obviously, those have proliferated all around New York City now with the restaurants, but we're proposing to do those not tied to a food service establishment, but as a small scale public space opportunity in areas around the district where that makes sense. So we're going to look for 2 or 3 places in the neighborhood where we could install street seats that rather than, each one of them looking different, like every different restaurant, would again have a unified theme that connects to the public spaces in Union Square and at the DOT plazas. So I think that's most of what we're going to try to accomplish in the immediate year. And then next year, we're going to look at potentially trying to pilot some street furniture elements, additional ones.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to check, Mary Brosnahan, I assume you lowered your hand on purpose, or did you still have a question?
I have more of a comment, so I realized I should wait until we get to the comment phase.
I don't, I think it's probably appropriate to raise comments now as well, since we don't have an action to debate or vote on tonight. So I think providing feedback in the form of a comment to the presenters makes sense now as well.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. Super blown away by your presentation. Thank you for all the time and effort that you guys have put into this. I just wanted to flag a couple things. When you're talking about, I think your slide is on page 24 of your presentation, a dynamic development, almost exclusively you're flagging multi-million-dollar condos that have sprouted up. And in particular, you point to the new Target on 14th Street. That's going to displace, you talked about access to affordable food. That's going to displace the Food Emporium, which is the last remaining somewhat affordable food shopping place for people like us. I live on 17th Street between Park Avenue and Irving. I've lived here for 35 years. That means basically we're all going to have to shop at Whole Foods. That's really going to be a hit to some of our neighbors who just can't afford that price level of food. I guess the thing that folks on the committee and on the board as a whole have heard me speak about before is the absolute traffic nightmare that is Park Avenue South. Basically, we have this 14th Street busway. We were supposed to have a concerned study that was going to focus and give us the data that we needed to really drill down and see how this was affecting traffic patterns and also just the congestion. And I can just tell you that the north-south implications for that 14th Street busway are profound. I'm not going to, use up everyone's time. I saw actually a guy on a bike being thrown to the ground at 5 o'clock today. Fortunately, there were police right there. Unfortunately, they had trouble getting to the perpetrator because it's gridlock here. And so when I see a plan that basically talks about eliminating southbound traffic by combining Union Square with the Triangle Park, it really alarms me. And I just have to put a great big red flag of caution up around that. And also, if you're going to choke 17th Street off more, I'm concerned that this traffic nightmare is going to be backed up literally to my front door. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
I'll just, I know it was a comment and not a question, but I just want to address, Mary, your concerns. One of the things that we talked about internally was that we didn't want to spend partnership dollars on high-level traffic studies right now because of the fact that, the reality is that congestion pricing is going to be implemented in the near future, probably sometime in this calendar year. And that is going to have a significant impact on traffic in general, hopefully for the better. And so we didn't want to spend the time to do the traffic study before we had the real data post the implementation of congestion pricing. And we have the time to wait and figure it out. But I would say, in order to assuage any concerns about the negative impacts, is to say that in general, we will not do anything to the traffic patterns along that stretch without coming back to you, the community, with plans, and obviously in partnership with our partners at the city, specifically the Department of Transportation. So these are all super high level, wishful thinking maybe, but we will definitely spend some time, and we will make sure when we are proposing ideas in partnership with the city that they do not end up having unintended consequences.
Right. We will validate these ideas with a detailed network analysis, which we did not have an opportunity to do with part of this plan. This is kind of broad strokes. We had a traffic engineer. They said, this is not crazy what you're thinking. It's not necessarily more complicated than closing Broadway through Times Square, or, historically closing Fifth Avenue through Washington Square Park, but that this needs to be further studied. And there's a lot of details, particularly around, Park Avenue South, Union Square East, the pressures on that area, the hospital, the residential buildings, just making sure that it works for everyone will require the detailed analysis, and that's what we'd be coming back with.
Thanks. Aaron Ford.
Hey guys, thank you for the presentation. There's some great stuff here. It's really fascinating to see sort of a reimagination of the space. So but my one question is, I guess, a clarifying question on the last comment or question. So the Park Avenue South traffic, that is actually, with connecting the triangle, that is like not a slow street. That is not, the proposal is that street goes away, not a shared street or a slow street. Is that correct? So someone would have to turn on 17th or 16th. You won't be able to sort of, in some of the diagrams, it was a little unclear which ones there are no real shared or slow streets on that side of the park.
What I would say is that it's not decided yet. A slow street could also be part of the, what ends up happening, given the realities of what the needs are on 15th Street coming from, say, Zeckendorf Towers, or the hospital. So, and I don't know if you want to show the other rendering. So we had another rendering done for illustrative purposes because we knew this was going to come up in all of our community meetings.
Yeah, I mean, I show the plan view here, and, we weren't trying to be, sneaky here, but the reality is the reason we didn't render Union Square East is because we really don't know how exactly it would work. And again, it requires this more detailed network analysis. It's just shown for conceptual purposes here as in this state closed to vehicle traffic. It's not necessarily doesn't have to be a permanent closure, doesn't have to be full-time. It could work a lot of different ways. It's showing, it's really kind of a detail. It's really too conceptual, but potentially does 17th Street still go straight through? Maybe, maybe not. Does this traffic, is it a forced left? Is it diverted further upstream? All of that is really TBD, but the most complicated part of this is actually not the upstream traffic. It's this intersection here of 15th Street and Union Square East, because of the, Target coming in, the hospital, Zeckendorf Towers parking garage empties out here, how this would play out. This is a lot of traffic pressure on this space right now. And so, this is how the rendering is shown in the published plan. The team did come up with an alternate design that shows this space allowing some kind of traffic to go through it, some kind of lower volume, lower speed. It's not articulated how that's being fed into here, but it's showing, well, this could still be a pedestrianized space that's kind of permeable and looks and feels connected, but allows for some level of vehicle flow. We created these diagrams. This is also not part of the plan. This is just purely as like a conversation aid. This is not a proposal, but it's just to illustrate that there are many, when you're digging up streets and moving curbs and stuff, there's many different ways it could work. It could be some kind of, like you said, it could be some kind of a shared street, pedestrian street that still allows an outlet of 15th. 15th Street could be reversed, so that just getting traffic off of the square. 15th Street could be two-way if that's important. In fact, it could even be that Union Square East, you might be able to move curbs to the west, get two-way traffic, but below 15th. 4th Avenue potentially below 14th could be reversed, all the way down. 4th Avenue used to be a two-way street going all the way down to Astor Place, and I think all the way down to Spring Street, where it kind of Lafayette and Center kind of mix. So, that is sort of much bigger than anything that we're proposing today, but all of that is just to say there's a lot of different ways it could be worked out when we kind of hear more feedback and get more details from a network level analysis.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful to see those specifics. Cool, thank you.
George Hikalis?
Yes, I just wanted to add on to the train of thoughts that just came out here. It's a fairly simple concept to have a cordon toll around the Manhattan CBD. The question really, and that's money in the bank, supposedly. But there's also the question of having, what are the traffic ramifications? And particularly, what are the potential benefits of turning the dial down on traffic in the core of the district? And that really means the 6 community boards in this area, south of Central Park, need to have a coordinated, comprehensive view of where they want to go. There is no such thing. We don't think that way in New York. Everything is ad hoc, battle each other at the last minute. I think it's a terrible mistake. We should be insisting, our board being sort of smack in the middle of this, that there be a comprehensive street use plan for the entire congestion pricing zone, which is Manhattan CBD, south of Central Park, in the rant. Thank you.
Thanks, George. Anyone else from our community board committees who have either questions or comments for the presenters? Okay. With that, we'll turn to members of the public who may have comments for the presenters. Please use the raise hand feature in Zoom if you do. Once again, I'll stress that as a board, we are not taking any action tonight. So questions or comments will be mainly directed towards the presenters that we've heard. And in the interest of time, obviously, you heard a lot of comments already from members of the committee, as well as from the presenters about concerns that they're aware of. I'd make sure to highlight any new questions or concerns as opposed to simply repeating anything that folks are aware of already. With that, we'll turn first to Samir.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I'll put down my hand. Thank you so much for coming and showing this presentation. It was really great. I learned a lot. I'm just going to quickly go through the notes I took, starting with the things I loved. Really loved the focus on accessibility with the subway and the benches. As you mentioned, it's great when it's a beautiful sunny day, but it's also great, when you have elderly people or people who just need to take a seat or take a break. They're usually forgotten, like in the new train hall. There's like nowhere for them to sit and take a break. My concerns, you showed a shared street on the top part of Union Square Park. I think that could work. I just like want to make sure it doesn't end up being like that awful area in Hudson Yards where they just like put a barrier the whole way and pedestrians basically can only cross in one section. Maybe we could put some membranes or like tight chicanes so people drivers have to really slow down instead of just going quickly through the area, which they do in other shared streets. And then with regards to Union Square Park East, I love the idea of just getting like opening it only to pedestrians. Right now it's horrible. It's like full of dangerous, loud cars that are honking all the time and hard to cross. And the only thing I would ask is that if you do decide to go that route or any of your other routes with the shared street, as you mentioned, this is like a 10 to 30-year plan, just trying to do something in the short term, just to, you know, have an improvement as soon as possible. Like if you're going to close the street, we don't have to wait for the beautiful treatment with the level curb. You can just throw down some planters and, you know, go from there, just to start. And that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's one. Thank you for those comments.
Thanks. Next up is
You know, I'll just add, given the opportunity, since I didn't mention this before, you know, the concept of joining the triangle to the park and, you know, and potentially closing the southbound side of Union Square East to traffic, it wasn't purely a public space play. It wasn't just the designers saying, oh, this would make more space is better. They're also looking really specifically at the fact that the intersection of Broadway and 14th Street, while improved by the busway, continues to be a dangerous intersection for pedestrians. You just, the way the Broadway kind of curves in, you get this traffic at the end of the light cycle comes in really fast. It continues to be a crash prone intersection and dangerous for pedestrians. So they're really looking at how to diminish the traffic volume coming in, you know, coming down that stretch. You also have a really kind of an inelegant interaction between the bikes and cars and pedestrians there. You've got the park trash pickup there that kind of also ends up in the bike lane. You've got PD parking, you know, the transit district headquarters is in the station. There's a lot of kind of just stuff happening on Union Square East. And we don't have all the answers today, but really this project would represent, you know, if we're rebuilding this in permanent materials, an opportunity to try to rationalize all of those movements and organize them and just kind of make it safer for everybody.
Thanks. I'm going to try to efficiently hear everybody on this item, probably aiming for 7:30, since the committee has 3 more applications to hear after this one tonight, before any of us are allowed to go to bed. Catherine Nessel is next.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. First, thank you so much, Ed and Jen, for the wonderful presentation. It's really uplifting to see something so bold and so forward thinking for Union Square, and just to really transform the place and allow for more pedestrian usage. You know, to echo what Samir was talking about, I really loved you know, the innovative use of planters and kind of consistent design throughout. And yeah, I would just like to focus on trying, I understand that things take time, especially in the environment we have here in the city, but trying to do whatever is possible for the summer to just have as much space, especially given that social distancing will still be an issue, at least for the earlier part of the summer. And yeah, I'm just curious to hear if, you know, your thoughts on like what the partnership is doing to, you know, maybe use more of the space in the short term, and if there's any like, you know, events like cultural events planned, you know, to kind of maybe kind of bring some culture to Union Square beyond kind of the protest activity, which is, you know, a great use of expression, but also just, you know, bring in maybe Broadway actors, or if there's been any thought to kind of in the short term, kind of take a lot of use of the space.
So what we can do, because I just want to be cognizant of time, and thank you so much, Catherine, for those questions, is we can compile a list of what we know is going on in the district and send it along to CB5 and disseminate that information to you that way. Because I just want to be like super efficient and not spend too much time, on the details, but we, and then we're still, to be honest, a lot of our partners are just finding out that they're being allowed to reopen. And so they are scrambling to make their plans right now. The only show that we have in the district that is officially already opened, or about to open, is Blindness at the Dale Roth Theater.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Next up is Gail Fox.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, Gail.
Okay, thank you. And thank you so much for the opportunity, for the hard work. Stay safe, stay sane. I just have 2 sentences and then would welcome your remark. First, as a resident in the area, I'm very interested in the lighting portion of the project and would ask it be prioritized as it affects safety and more. That was sentence 1. Sentence 2, I would also like to see you set up a residential advisory board, appoint one as part of your planning progress. Thank you again.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gail. We completely agree. I think the most impactful way, the 2 things that I would ask people when you're walking through the district at night to take a look at is, first, the beautiful facade work that the Dale Roth Theater did to illuminate the facade of their historic building. You'll really notice it. It'll really drive home this idea when you see the Dale Roth Theater in comparison to all the other darkened buildings, running north from them, that for some sort of additional lighting or facade lighting could really benefit the sidewalks and create an added feeling of safety. The other space is that in the last, it was like in the last 4 to 5 years, we've begun to upgrade all of the park lighting with LED energy efficient lighting. And the part of the park that has the most LED ballasts are in the southern end of the park. And so you'll really notice, if you look at the hue of our lights, you'll notice that there's better lighting on the southern end of the park, and we want to bring that to the other parts of the park. So definitely on lighting, we will continue to make improvements. And then on the Residential Advisory Committee, we definitely hear you, Gail. That's why we've been having all of our community conversations with all the residents for the last 2 months, and we will schedule more of them in May as well.
Thank you. Next up is Susan Kramer.
Hi, everybody. Great work, first of all, and looking forward to seeing a lot of this implemented. My former partner in crime, Gail Fox, and I, when we were co-chairs of Union Square Community Coalition, ordered the first set of the folding Parisian park furniture that you see now. So very proud that we started that. In any case, I just want to reiterate about the bike lane. Whether your bike is fast or slow, there does need to be a better delineation of the bikes from the pedestrians in this single grade. That's the first thing. Next is, where would the Green Market trucks park? How do they access their refrigerated items? Next, the 16th Street subway entrance, fabulous idea. I would love for the design to be similar to the canopies that are so distinctive that we have on the south end. That would be great if they look similar. Next, on the East Triangle, which seems to get a lot of attention, it seems like we're causing more problems than we're solving by changing the traffic pattern. Yes, it is dangerous. Is there not an easier solution to slow down the traffic by putting, I don't know what they're called professionally, but the bumps, texturizing the lane there to slow the buses, to slow the cars, taxis, etc., rather than changing the whole pattern and integrating that triangle. Also, the triangle new design, I know it's not anywhere near finished, but it does look very heavy on hardscape. Which someone else mentioned, I think Barbara mentioned. We seem to have lost a little bit and maybe it's good and bad. It has a little bit of an oasis feeling right now where all the benches face inward, and it is sort of a quiet feeling area. I know that can be dangerous, but it also has a kind of nice quality about it. And maybe there's a better design. I feel like they're kind of missing that. Also, they took out the cherry trees, which are really beautiful. I don't know, I think that's kind of about it for my list. But thanks so much.
Thank you, Susan. First and foremost, you and Gail deserve an enormous amount of credit for your work in the past to improve Union Square Park. And I know that I mentioned this on a previous community conversation. We're deeply grateful to you and Gail for all that you do for us as an organization, as well as for the park. I've written down all of your comments, and we are definitely adding them to the list. And, you know, we couldn't agree more, particularly with the idea that, and I think this has been echoed by several members of the committee, that anything we can do to make improvements in the near term, we're definitely not going to wait 30 years to do everything. And I know that some of our agency partners are listening in to this meeting and hopefully also taking notes. So anywhere we can make improvements in the near term, we will definitely do that.
And I can't leave this meeting, as somebody who works for the Parks Department and for park partner organizations, I can't leave the meeting without saying we are not proposing removal of any trees. There might have been some trees in the before and afters that aren't there purely for visualization purposes, but there were no trees harmed in the creation of this plan, I promise.
Okay, thanks. Are there any other members of the public, or really anybody who has any additional questions or comments for the presenters before we let them go? Paul Mulhauser, you may now speak. Paul, you're muted, but if you'd like to, you can unmute now and ask your question.
Thank you. Well, this is Paul Mulhauser. I was active in the 14th Street Coalition and the busway, trying to coordinate a realistic plan. I think you guys have done a great job aesthetically. I am a designer, so hats off to you. It's a beautiful image, and a lot of it is very sensible. But also as a product designer, I look at the practicalities, things have to work. I think the effort that's been put into the busway to make sure that it goes across town efficiently is important, and slowing it down to 5 miles an hour into basically just sharing a space so that the buses are sharing space with pedestrians is going to be potentially dangerous. I'd like to see a little bit better delineation in the space rather than blasting the graphics across the park up to Whole Foods. I think even any sort of curb cut doesn't have to be a literal curb. It could be a change in grade. Besides being helpful to drainage, to control it, I think it'd be helpful to keep kids from wandering into the street in front of the buses. I don't think they'll see the bollards as being a substantial definition. So I'd like to see at least curbs going through that area. As far as eliminating the triangle to eliminate the traffic going southbound, I think you're going to cut off Broadway drastically. It's a huge change to the lower part of Broadway, which continues all the way downtown. It's the main thoroughfare from 14th Street down. Maybe it makes sense actually to straighten out the southbound traffic from Union Square South into Broadway. Making it work more efficiently could actually it wouldn't speed it up necessarily, work that one out, but making it work more efficiently by straightening it out is probably going to make it safer. The triangle becomes redefined by the traffic flow through it. And I'll leave the rest to you guys.
Oh, Paul, thank you for those thoughtful comments. We really, really appreciate it. And we've added it to our list. I want to be super cognizant of the community board's time, and we will come back to the community board as well as all of our partners when we have more detail on the traffic plans.
Thanks very much. Well, we'll look forward to that. Seeing no other hands of comments from folks, I'll just say thank you to the presenters. You know, we know you'll probably come back many times over the next 20 or 30 years with more specifics about what you're doing in the short term and how you're executing on a plan like this, and that you obviously will continue to engage the community in a bunch of different ways. But thanks tonight for giving us this opportunity to kind of dig comprehensively into the whole plan, and much appreciated for the materials that you mentioned you would send along for distribution.
EJ, Clayton, Vicky, the rest of Community Board 5 that's here, and the members of the public, thank you so much for all of your thoughtful comments on the plan. We are committed to doing the very best we can by this neighborhood, a neighborhood that we deeply love. And we promise to come back to you often. You'll be so sick of us by the time we get to shovels in the ground, but we hope in the end it'll just lead to an even better plan. And so I really thank everyone for their time tonight, and please stay safe.
Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, Jen and Ed. With that, members of the Parks Committee, thanks for joining for this joint section of our committee meeting tonight. I released the Parks Committee. T&E will trundle ahead. But see the rest of you later. For the Transportation Environment Committee, we have 3 more applications on our agenda tonight. They all promise to be much shorter and more succinct than our first item. We'll give each of the applicants an opportunity to present and talk about their application, but I frankly suspect that they'll all be pretty brief to each of the applicants. As succinct as you can reasonably make your presentation. 10 minutes or less, unless you really feel like you need more than that. We'll be able to give your application a thorough hearing and discussion. Our next application of the evening is a bus application by Intercity Bus Operator LX Transportation LLC for a bus stop on West 37th Street at 7th Avenue in front of 201 West 37th Street. I want to take a minute just to provide a little context for the committee up front, because it's really been over a year since we've heard an application for an intercity bus stop. To remind folks of kind of our precedent and the state of affairs, the Department of Transportation has told us in the past that because of interstate commerce law, they must approve every interstate bus stop application that they get. When we as Community Board 5 deny a bus stop application, the DOT approves it anyway. We have learned over time that the best way to engage the city on this and to protect the community from harmful effects of these applications is that while denial doesn't accomplish anything, if we weigh in on the location, the city does respond and take our comments of the suitability of a location into account. There was a time over the last year where we thought that our district was being inundated with so many of these bus stops, and they were causing such congestion that we really had no recourse except to maybe weigh a permanent moratorium and just remove ourselves from the process entirely. Obviously, things have changed dramatically since then. First, DOT has shown a willingness to take our comments into the suitability of a location into account. Secondly, the past year has really changed everything. There's much lower traffic congestion on the streets. We've obviously received almost no bus applications over the last year, and now the prospect of coming congestion pricing seems to indicate that there will not probably be a mirroring increase in congestion going forward. Finally, one other thing to add is that now public plans to redevelop the Port Authority bus terminal seem to indicate that years down the road, maybe 6 or 8 or 10 years down the road, a new expanded Port Authority bus terminal will potentially take intercity buses off the streets. So, taking the kind of Alamo style stand against all bus applications doesn't necessarily seem as necessary a statement as maybe when we talked about bus stops a year or two in the past. That being the case, current precedent is to weigh in on an incoming application like this and to make our voice heard on whether or not we find the location that is recommended by DOT to be suitable. or whether we would recommend an alternative. So I wanted to, just because it's been a long time since we've discussed buses as bus stops, intercity bus stops as a committee, provide that additional context. With that, I'm going to ask Sarah Dowson, a member of our committee, to take a minute or two just to report on the diligence that she's done. And then we'll turn things over to the applicant to say their piece as well.
Hello. I prepared this report with the help of colleagues on the committee. It is an application by LX Transportation Bus Company for a permit to stop in front of 37th Street and 7th Avenue, or in front of 201 West 37. One pickup on Thursday and Saturday at 3:30 p.m., two pickups on Friday and Sunday at 3:30 p.m. and 6:45 p.m. The bus will go from NYC to Virginia Beach, Virginia, and Norfolk, Virginia. The area itself is relatively clear of stores and stuff like that. You've got Chase Bank, you have an office building, you have FedEx office there, and a WeWork office. Nothing too congestion problematic. The street itself on 37th Street has 4 lanes, one on each side for parking, 2 lanes for crosstown traffic. Sidewalks are adequate. However, I did visit the site yesterday at 3:45 p.m. That was on Sunday. There were about 100 people there lined up to wait for a 4 p.m. bus going to Virginia Beach. The line was against the wall and around a corner, and yes, pedestrians had room to pass. There's one bus company that operates there. They have 2 names, Sprinter Bus and Vision Tours. Let's see. Vision Tours is a problem, though. It has a lot of stops there. It has drop-offs at that spot Sundays through Saturdays, 6 a.m., also 11 p.m. on Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday. And pickups are 9 a.m. Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday, 4 p.m. Sunday through Saturday, that's all week, and then 11:59 p.m. Sunday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Now, there is a Sprinter Bus website, again, same company. They have 11 p.m. in that area departures from Virginia coming to New York City. The only problem I saw, well, 2 questions. DOT thinks that the bus space itself is big enough for 2 buses. I saw that big bus. I think it's big enough for 1 bus. And secondly, the 3:30 p.m. LX pickup times might conflict with the Vision Tours 4 p.m. pickup time. That's a half an hour difference. Maybe there should be a little time adjustment there. Otherwise, though, I see no problem with the LX application. Take it away, LX or EJ.
Great.
Hi, my name is Luke. I am Luke Thompson. I'm the operations manager for LX Transportation. Basically, Sarah covered most of what I was going to cover. But also, I believe the application said it was only for 1 bus. I don't know where the thing about 2 buses, but there's definitely not room for 2 buses there. The spot is perfectly sized for 1 bus without any extra space for really even maybe a small car. So it's not a 2-space bus stop. I believe the DOT is aware of that.
It's Colleen from DOT, and you're absolutely right. It's space for 1 bus at a designated time or given times. You're absolutely right. Luke.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for clarifying, Colleen.
Yeah, so so right now we're planning on doing a 3:30. So the existing bus that leaves from there, that's I'm not sure, the permit's under Vision Tours, but they run under Sprinter Bus, as Sarah mentioned. They don't arrive until about 20 minutes prior. So their bus shouldn't be there until 3:40, so it shouldn't conflict with that. I'm not sure what DOT's time is for spacing them, but they felt that 30 minutes was adequate. But I'm not sure what exactly the standard they use is, but we, don't believe that's gonna cause too much of a conflict because, our passengers are gonna be on our bus when their passengers, very early passengers would just be lining up, and they'd be lining up anyway. So when those passengers who are very early before their bus arrives get there, they should be the only ones on the street because our passengers will be already on the bus. But I do see where there would be some concern about that.
So it's Colleen from DOT. So given that we have another bus operator that uses this stop, what we do is that we review, your hours, your operating hours, along with the other bus company to make sure that there are no conflicts. And, when we say expeditious, we mean, expeditious pickup and drop off, which means, it probably should take you maybe 10 to 15 minutes to get people on and off the bus. So you're not there more than 30 minutes or so. And again, it's all about your good management, your good time management, making sure your customers are on your bus and off your bus expeditiously.
Yeah, well,
is there a particular situation where you might have people lining up for the second bus while the first bus hasn't arrived yet, just because they're showing up early? Is that a concern?
Not really, because if we're arriving 20 to 30 minutes early, that's almost an hour before their departure time. So that goes back to what I was saying before, that an hour prior to their departure, I don't think there would be more than 1 or 2 people for their departure there when our bus arrives, which would be almost an hour prior to their scheduled departure time. Loading a bus does take a while. It usually, at a minimum, we like to give 20 minutes because it does take time for everyone to get on and load the luggage, and also reduces the number of people waiting around on the curb when you come 20 to 30 minutes early. I actually think that provides less of an impact by coming early, because the passengers get to the stop, they get right on the bus, and then they're off the sidewalk.
Okay, thanks, Luke. Is there anything else you wanted to add, or does that pretty much cover everything from your perspective?
Yeah, that pretty much covers everything. We were thinking about moving it to 3 o'clock anyway. That's something that we actually applied to the city for a second permit, because you can't change the application or the permit. If you want to add extra times, they basically consider it a new application. So we submitted another application, I think a month ago, adding a duplicative 3 p.m. departure. Obviously, we wouldn't have 2 departures a half hour away from each other going to the same place. That would be horrible business. To have them spaced that closely, we'd be cannibalizing our own market. But we did that just to give us flexibility. We don't mind paying the permit fee for 2 departures, just to give us that flexibility that we may want to move it to 3 o'clock instead of 3:30. Mostly that's because of traffic concerns. Once things pick back up, we feel that it could be possible that a 3 o'clock would be more desirable. Right now, there's a permit there for a 2:30 that's not being used. There's a Morning Sun bus company that does have a 2:30 slot. I should point that out, but they are not using it right now. I don't know if they're permanently ceased operations or what, but as it stands right now, there is an outstanding permit for a 2:30 p.m. pickup as well.
May I just point out, I called Morning Sun's number. It was a totally wrong number. So I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I don't know much about them. I know that they were running buses to Washington, D.C. for like ridiculous prices, like $10 a ticket. And as soon as the pandemic hit, they just sort of disappeared, and I don't know if they're coming back. But right now, they have a permit for 2:30. So
Thanks.
that sort of confines us to the 3 or the 3:30 time slot.
Colleen, do you have any information on Morning Sun, whether they still operate?
So my guess is that they probably still do operate if the sign is there, but I can find out from our bus stop management if we've heard anything, and I'll get back to the committee tomorrow.
The sign was not there for Morning Sun.
Okay.
Not
I will
there
find out.
yesterday and today.
I don't think Morning Sun has ever had a sign at that bus stop, though. I think that permit was issued less than a year before COVID, so I don't think they used the stop very long, and I know bus stop management doesn't always put up a sign, so in their defense, there may never have been a sign with their name on it, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'll confirm that, and I'll get back to the committee tomorrow.
Okay. Thanks, Colleen. I'm going to open things up to the members of the committee to ask questions in a second, but it sounds to me like if Morning Sun is not operating at all anymore, it doesn't have a sign there and hasn't run any buses in a year, perhaps there's some flexibility there to grant LX's earlier bus stop and perhaps alleviate any time crunch of the 3:30 and the 4 o'clock buses being too close to each other. But I know that there's a lot of ifs attached to that. So it'll be helpful, Colleen, to get that information from DOT. Are there any other questions from any members of the committee? Sarah, hearing what we just heard about the fact that loading and unloading will go pretty quickly and that there's perhaps not a lot of risk of overlap of pedestrians waiting around. Do you think that 3:30 and 4 o'clock buses from two different companies are kind of too close together? Number one, and number two, if so, do you think an earlier pickup at like 3 o'clock would alleviate that?
Just based on what I saw yesterday, with about 100 people lined up for that 4 o'clock bus, I do not see how loading and unloading can go zip, zip, no matter how efficiently things are run. So I would be in favor of giving it more time between pickups.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. George Hicalis, do you have a question?
Well, it's just a repeat of what I've said in the past, that we have a gigantic bus terminal was designed precisely to take the buses off the streets. Having people wait in a bus terminal provides protection from weather, it gives them options to go to the restroom, to buy food. A civilized way to have intercity bus passengers is to use the bus terminal. I am sure that the ridership level has dramatically declined. I don't have numbers. Maybe we could ask for numbers, but I don't think at this point in time we should have any more buses parking, unloading on the streets in the core of Manhattan if they could fit into the bus terminal. It's much better for the passengers. It's much better for the city. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, George. I mean, obviously, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I don't know that we have numbers from of the decline just during coronavirus, and I would be interested to see those based on the prior status quo. We know that we've been told that there wasn't space in the current terminal and that DOT does need to approve intercity bus stops, curbside pickups. That having been said, hopefully what I understand is that the new expanded terminal, which is years down the road, of course, but the goal of that would be to take all the buses off the street with the appropriate capacity in the way that the Port Authority says they don't have now. So, I guess that's like 9 grains of salt, but take of that what you will. Noah.
Yes. If someone was to take the bus at 3:30, what time would they come? What is your
Most people come about 15 minutes early. That would be the average, but it's sort of a slow trickle. If we arrive half hour prior, we can usually there's usually a small handful of people waiting, maybe 4 or 5 people. I'm considering a full bus. When we've done this in the past, part of the bus is going to be in a luxury configuration with like more first class style seats. So it's less capacity. We're not going to be 56 passengers. We're going to be at most 40 passengers. But out of that number, assuming the bus is full and we have that number of people riding the bus, usually 4 or 5 show up before a half hour. So if we should get there in a half hour, we load those passengers and those bags, and then everybody else just sort of trickles in. And then there's a little bit of a surge at the last couple of minutes, but with people getting there just right on time. And then, but it's pretty evenly spaced out over a half hour.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Oh, and I did want to add to the point that George made about the Port Authority. We did look into that, and the problem with them is they only lease. Well, first of all, it's full. I believe one carrier went out of business, so they indicated there may be some space available. They will only lease an entire gate. And there's also weight restrictions on the buses, which most buses don't meet, actually. There's just 2 models of buses that meet the lower weight requirement. Actually 3 models. There's one MCI model, one Prevo model, and one Van Hool model. They're not the most common buses. They're the second most common buses. So the most common buses are actually too heavy. That's what we have. So they're actually 51,000 pounds gross weight, whereas the bus terminal has a 48,000 pound maximum. And also if we were lucky to get it enough to get a gate, we would have to get the whole gate, which is not what we need for 4 to 6 departures a week. And it would probably end up costing an exorbitant amount based on the few number of departures. It's not a very easy process to get in there. We've tried, and even if they do give you a gate, like I said, we'd probably be on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for that one gate. And for 6 departures a week, maybe even 4 if we don't do 2 on Fridays and Sundays. I mean, that just absolutely does not make sense. Makes it completely inviable. I do wish the Port Authority had would be a little more flexible with smaller operators, but unfortunately they are absolutely not.
Thanks, that's helpful context. Sam Levy.
I just wanted to add to that point. In the discussions about the Port Authority expansion coming up in years ahead, we have suggested numerous times, and will continue to do so, and advocate for common use gates so that they're not owned or blocked by a particular operator, but so precisely some of this flexibility can take place in the future. Unfortunately, that is not the case currently, where people have to purchase gates or extended amount of space.
Yep.
Yeah, you actually become a tenant of the Port Authority, and you have to sign a lease agreement. It's like a 100-page agreement. I've seen some of the ones that carriers have there. It's a lot of red tape and a lot of inflexibility when it comes to smaller companies.
Yep. Thanks, Luke. Are there any other questions from members of the committee? Okay, seeing none right now, we'll turn things over to any members of the public who are in attendance who would like to speak up with a question or a comment. Please use the raise hand feature. Not seeing any of those and not seeing any more questions at all, we'll take things now into our business session. This is, at this point, we're just speaking among members of the committee. Thanks to the applicant for the information you provided, but this is just an internal discussion going forward. Are there any comments from members of the committee? Sarah?
Yeah, I think if Luke is pretty convinced that they can meet this timetable with the half hour between the two buses, let's give it a try. But I'm not as experienced as some of you others on this committee.
Yeah, and I'm
not
not
a little bit of reading tea leaves, Sarah, but obviously, it also seems helpful that he's expressed willingness to and already applied for a for the earlier slot, and expressed willingness to pay for both slots simply to have that flexibility as well as needed. So that to me seems like good willingness on the behalf of the applicant. Perhaps it being your kind of determination, having visited the site multiple times, that could work well, and the applicant having expressed willingness to keep that option open for an earlier pickup if it's needed. I think maybe that's something we could put into our resolution, a recommendation that DOT approve that and make it an option available to the applicant that they're trying to get anyway. But I think that's very helpful, Sarah. Thanks. Any other comments from any members of the committee or other recommendations for action? Well, hearing no serious objections, it sounds like we might generally be okay with this application, maybe with that additional caveat that we recommend DOT approve the earlier pickup time as well. I would like to get the temperature, any other members of the committee, and thoughts that folks might be having. And if there are no major objections, if someone wanted to move an action, they could feel free to do that as well. Joel.
I would move to approve based on everything that Sarah reported and what we heard from the applicant, and with the options that you just talked about, the alternative.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Thank you very much. Sounds good to me. And with that, we can take that motion to approve to a vote. Levy.
Yes.
Clark.
Yes.
Dowson.
Yes.
Goldman.
Yes.
Goshaw.
Yes.
Hartman.
Yes.
Pawson. Pawson is no longer on. Raybar.
Yes.
Stern.
Yes.
BJ. Sung? BJ, can you hear us? You're muted. Finkel.
Yes.
Whalen.
Yes.
Icalis. Icalis. Maxman.
Yes.
I'm going to be a yes. Going. George votes no. And going back to BJ.
Sorry.
No vote from BJ. Okay. The motion passes.
You forgot about me, by the way.
I'm sorry. I meant to ask if I had.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I forgot. I had noted that you came in late tonight, but I'm sorry about that. And BJ is a yes as well. Okay. Sorry, Pete. Okay. Thanks everybody. Thanks to the applicant, and thank you, Sarah, for the excellent report on the application. To the applicant, we passed this out of committee tonight. It'll be voted on again by our full board of Community Board 5 on, I believe, Thursday, April 8th. So at this point, it's only gone out of committee. It hasn't been adopted by the full board. It'll be voted on by the full board on April 8th. You're welcome to attend on that night. You're welcome to all members of the public have 2 minutes to speak. So you're welcome to speak on that or any topic that you like, if you would like to speak that night. But it'll have to be adopted by the full board before it becomes the position of Community Board 5. With that, that concludes that item. Thanks to the applicant. Moving along to our third item of the night, which is a revocable consent for bollards at 10 Vanderbilt. I believe we have Harry Olson and Omar Toravaca in attendance. Is that true?
Hi, you also have Mike Nelson from Langen. I'll be leading the presentation.
Great. Okay. Thanks. With that, I'll turn things over to you, Mike.
All right. Thanks, EJ. Thanks, CB5. You should be seeing a PowerPoint any moment.
Yes, we do.
Excellent. All right. So good evening. Like I said, my name is Michael Nelson. I'm here on behalf of Langen Engineering. We're the civil engineer of record for the project. Thanks for allowing us to present the perimeter security plan for One Vanderbilt. As I said, I'm joined by Harry Olson, representing SL Green Ownership. Going to just take a couple of minutes, walk through a few slides illustrating the perimeter security system that's been implemented at One Vanderbilt. As typical, the bollards have undergone your normal DOT city agency review process. We received the TSP, and this presentation was scheduled as part of the revocable consent process. So this plan here, just for overall context, shows One Vanderbilt in the middle, hatched in gray, bordered obviously by 42nd, 43rd, Madison, and what's now Vanderbilt Place or Vanderbilt Plaza. The ring of bollards is shown in red, starting up here at Vanderbilt and 43rd, where we're approaching the existing Grand Central bollards, wrapping around the north, west, south sides of the site, and ending again adjacent to Grand Central bollards, just east of Vanderbilt Place at 42nd Street. The bollards are designed to maintain standoff distance from both One Vanderbilt and Vanderbilt Place. They've been designed with feedback from all applicable city agencies for emergency response, et cetera. And there are select locations around the perimeter where access has been provided via removal bollards for maintenance of city infrastructure, maintenance of the plaza, et cetera, as required by the various city agencies. For context, just got a couple of slides showing the final conditions. So this is a rendering from 42nd and Vanderbilt looking north. This just conveys the concept of the One Vanderbilt bollards, where they approach Grand Central bollards. This is not the design plan. They are set back from the curb per DOT requirements, et cetera. But this concept here is just that, it's basically an extension of the existing Grand Central bollards that ring the site and join up on 42nd and Vanderbilt, as well as 43rd and Vanderbilt in the background there. This rendering is from 42nd and Madison looking east towards Grand Central and the Chrysler Building, just showing the bollards, in context with the One Vanderbilt development, as well as adjacent conditions. And what is often a concern, the style of the bollards, we heard it earlier tonight from one of the other applications. Grand Central has distinct bollards. These are not the DOT standard, but they are bronze with a ring approaching the top and a rounded top on that. So the decision with DOT and PDC some time ago was to extend this style bollard around One Vanderbilt. So we are not introducing a new material or anything like that. There'll be consistent bronze sleeve with the ring and dome top. And this here is just illustrating that again. This is one of the renderings for the actual bollard on the project. And that's really all there is to it. Be happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Thanks. I will open things up to questions from the committee, although I do have a couple myself to start with. Number one, you mentioned that the bollards were designed with all the necessary city agencies. I'm curious where the final approval decision lies. The bollard bollard design process has always been a little bit opaque to us at the community level. Who does the final sign off on a design and security posture that's considered accurate? Who puts the final check mark on it?
So the final check mark it's sort of shared between PDC and DOT. PDC has the ultimate final check mark on the look and feel of everything. DOT has the final say on the use of the public space, or the volume of space occupied by the bollards in the public right of way.
And you mentioned that you were coming to us because it was a expected and required part of the process. Whose process exactly? Is it PDC's process?
It is the DOT revocable consent process.
DOT's revocable consent.
Right.
And what is the current status of this installation? Are they installed already? Are they waiting to be installed?
So I don't have an exact number on me, but I would say about 70%, 75% are installed. And the remaining are pending, construction logistics. But when the TSP is issued by DOT, that grants permission for the installation to commence.
So are they being installed before the revocable consent has been issued, or has the revocable consent already been issued?
The revocable consent has not been finalized. The TSP is what allows the installation to begin in advance of the legal agreement, et cetera. That's part of the revocable consent process.
Okay. I guess I'm trying to figure out what role we potentially the community board potentially has here, since obviously they're 70% installed already, and so I'm inclined to interpret the community board's role as more or less just you're sort of informing us of what's already taking place under the terms of the TSP. Even though the revocable consent hasn't been finalized yet. I do have one more question myself about the design itself, and then I'll turn things over. And I apologize if you mentioned this. My internet cut out for maybe 15 seconds or so, right when I thought you might have been getting to this. There is now a redundant series of bollards that directly adjacent to Grand Central Terminal, between the plaza and the terminal. I assume that that's not One Vanderbilt turf, that's Grand Central turf. Do you know if the intention is to remove those now redundant bollards between two obviously pedestrian areas?
The Metro North that operates Grand Central has indicated that those bollards need to remain. I'll defer to Harry if you have any other comment to make on that.
Harry, go ahead. You can speak.
Looks like he might have unmuted, but I can't hear him.
Yep, me either.
But yes, that topic was broached and discussed with Metro North and DOT, and it's Metro North's position that those bollards remain.
That's odd to me. I think the one other thing I was going to ask is, and you had an illustration of the bollards in relation to the existing ones. If those existing bollards, if Metro North did figure that they could remove them, which to me at least common sense would seem to indicate. No, I'm sorry, it was a rendering. I think maybe 2 slides forward.
Sure, this one.
This one, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
If Metro North decided those were redundant and could be removed, the new bollards extending west around One Vanderbilt don't actually line up with the with, say, the bollards that would continue in front of Grand Central. Did you just assume those bollards would never be removed, and that those two systems wouldn't really link up at all, or am I kind of reading this rendering wrong?
So I'm going to go back to the plan here, which is admittedly difficult to make out probably at this scale, but the location where the new bollards essentially meet the Grand Central bollards, that spacing there is as required to maintain standoff distance. So it might be a matter of, in this case, this bollard were to be the last to remain, and then additional could be removed, whatever the case may be. But theoretically, there'd be no issue with removing these on from the One Vanderbilt perspective. There'd be no issue with removing the so-called redundant bollards.
Yeah, I guess I'm just asking if the redundant bollards were removed, the 2 lines of bollards on the curb side would not really line up. Is that correct?
Correct. They would, yes, correct. They would be offset because the Grand Central existing bollards are set back farther than DOT standard from the curb line. And there's challenges as you were to move west along 42nd Street with transit vaults and ventilation structures, that even if we could have said, let's set it back another 2 feet or so, that wouldn't have been possible.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Harry, are you still with us? Have you been able to speak? I saw your hand was raised. I guess not. With that, do any members of the committee have any questions? Joel.
One quick one. How do emergency vehicles get in from 42nd Street onto what used to be Vanderbilt?
There are a series of removable bollards, both at 42nd and 43rd, that were coordinated directly with NYPD, FDNY, and MTA Police and their respective sub-organizations. So yes,
that's it. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions from members of the committee? I suppose I'm curious at this point, and Mike, this question may be for you or it may be from Colleen at DOT. I'm still essentially trying to determine what is the most productive role of the community board to play here in chiming in on this revocable consent. We don't get very many of them on the Transportation and Environment Committee.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, EJ.
Go ahead.
Omar Torovaca from Kassir's office said that he can help, I believe, on this topic. He just sent me a note. If you can allow him to speak, if you'd like him to speak, feel free. If you could allow him. I'm not sure what that entails.
Yep, we can make that happen. Or Omar, you're permitted to speak now.
Thanks, TJ. Yeah, I've been representing SL Green and working with DOT on the outreach process for this entire approval. So just for your reference, the plaza has been before Community Board 5 before going to the PDC on the design and layout that you see illustrated in this rendering. At that time, there were a bunch of questions raised about the redundancy of the bollards, and it would have been the applicant's desire to see the redundant row disappear. But what we learned in the process and in conversation with DOT was that, in fact, these are federally funded bollards run Grand Central as a measure put into place with, I guess, funding to combat terrorism. And based on that, premise, DOT, New York City DOT did not feel like they could approve their removal. And they preferred to have the redundant row there, even though the applicant had presented originally a design that did not.
Okay. Thanks, Omar. That is interesting color, and I'm sure it's correct, although it sort of makes me laugh at government bureaucracy a little bit. Thank you. Much appreciated for the information. Back to the question of what the community board's role is right now. Yeah, and this might be a question to Mike. It might be a question to Colleen. Are you asking us of anything relative to the revocable consent this evening, or are you here mainly in an informational capacity?
So, a lot of other community boards also hear presentations on revocable consent. And what it is with our role, the city DOT's role, is to have the agencies or the companies come before the community board and give the presentation. It's more informational. And most community boards vote in support of these revocable consents, and they send resolutions to DOT stating that, they have no objections with moving forward with, the agency's presentation on the revocable consent. I mean, if you feel that that is something that the board or the committee wants to take on by sending us a resolution, that's great. We welcome that. Or I can just let, our revocable consent division know that, the presenters came and gave a presentation to the committee, and, there were no major objections that were raised about, this particular project. It's up to the committee how you want to handle it.
Okay. Thanks, Colleen.
But it's informational, just so you know.
Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing no other questions from anyone on the committee, I'll throw things over to our dwindling members of the public. Any questions or comments? Zoe Davidson, you are permitted to speak.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the board's willingness to give me a few moments after a very long meeting. I'm here on behalf of Milstein Properties and the owners of 335 Madison Avenue, which is next door to One Vanderbilt. For the record, we support the bollards. I asked to speak tonight because the bollards underscore what we feel is a serious safety issue that we wanted to raise to the board's attention. When the traffic plan was created in conjunction with One Vanderbilt's development years ago, no one could have anticipated the storm of activity brewing right now in the 4 blocks between 43rd and 47th Streets in Madison and Vanderbilt Avenues. A storm that we believe will linger for the next 2 to 3 years. Here are the storm factors. Starting now and over the next couple of years, One Vanderbilt, who claims to be about 70% leased, will have a substantial number of tenant build-outs, which will require large flatbed trucks carrying sheetrock and other construction materials. that cannot be pulled into their loading dock as a result of the way the dock is constructed and access into the dock. So they'll have to unload the street and carry them up in a forklift, which blocks the street. Over this same period of time, we will have major building development at 347 Madison, 2 blocks away north, and the new JP Morgan Chase Tower 3 blocks north. So over the next couple of years, we will have substantially more big box delivery trucks, construction trucks, 18-wheelers perpetually circling 43rd, 44th, 45th, and 46th streets as they line up to get access to each other's building docks and construction sites in that 4-block zone. Congestion pricing will have no effect on this traffic. So our good neighbors, SL Green and One Vanderbilt, have thoughtfully, proactively hired a logistics coordinator for their loading dock. But if a truck misses its slot, the coordinator will tell the truck to circle the block and wait for another slot, which means they will be circling 335 Madison Avenue, up north on Madison, turning on 44th, back down to Vanderbilt. Doesn't take a leap of imagination to understand that the congestion created when all of these trucks of these 4 major projects happening simultaneously are going to push trucks up on the sidewalks or into loading zones of other buildings along Vanderbilt and Grand Central. If each building focuses only on coordinating its own loading dock schedule without a community approach that encompasses the buildings in those 4 blocks, the pressure to manage traffic will fall on building security and loading dock workers who will be on the sidewalk front lines, literally telling truckers where to go. While we'd like to believe that the folks will be professional, I think we can expect that some of these confrontations could lead to fisticuffs, which we are already seeing. It's not fair for a few individuals working on the ground to manage a problem that spreads across a community of 4 or 5 blocks of large commercial buildings and MTA. The next part of the safety issue that we see is for pedestrians. We think that the sidewalks in these 4 blocks will become utterly overwhelmed, putting people at risk. Bollards and loading docks, big truck traffic, restaurant sidewalk activity, and restaurant activity in street spaces are going to squeeze pedestrians into fewer and fewer desirable travel routes than might have been anticipated when these plans were first put together. And when you combine that with the increased density of more workers in these larger buildings and the commuters coming into the same zone when East Side Access comes online at the same time, we fear that there may be real risks to pedestrians and safety that should be considered now by this small community of people. So board members, we're looking to you for your support together with our neighbors, MTA and Grand Central Partnership, to help us develop a coordinated traffic plan and pedestrian plan that will ensure everyone's safety while we weather these next 3 years of unprecedented development and an influx of workers and commuters in these 4 square blocks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that comment. I think it's something that we could definitely that can definitely be examined on a community level. Just to clarify, you're not currently weighing in or otherwise opposing the bollard security revocable consent that we're hearing tonight, though, correct?
Correct. We support the bollards.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks for the comment and the clarification. Are there any other comments from members of the public? Or questions, comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, we will at this point go into our business session within the community, within the committee, to comment and determine what, if any, action to take tonight. As mentioned, other committees and other community boards perhaps see more revocable consents than us and have precedent for how to handle these in particular. We've heard tonight that DOT will essentially be satisfied going back and saying that that we were informed as necessary about what's being installed via the revocable consent, or would be happy with us taking a position of some kind. I am inclined to think that at this point, this design is set, and it does not seem like even if we took a strong position for or against, that we would be affecting this process in any sort of meaningful way. I'm interested to get the opinions of others on the committee to see if you think similarly or think differently. I don't think it's productive necessarily for us to just be a rubber stamp. That's never been our style or the best way of amplifying the voice of the community. So, you know, unless we have, and obviously I think there are some very weird government-y quirks about the ultimate design of bollards that we're ending up with that I think is undesirable. Nevertheless, it's 70% installed at this point, and you know, recommendations and comments that we made in the past about Metro North not leaving the redundant series of bollards, and any effort to figure out how to make them match better, you know, it clearly is being implemented in a different way. So, you know, I'm curious to get comments from other members of the committee. Unless we plan to come out strongly against the issuing of the final revocable consent that more or less authorizes what's already 70% installed, I don't know that I see a purpose in us taking an official position. But I'm curious to hear comments from members of the committee. If you'd like to go ahead and raise your hands. Sam.
I would just say I agree with you, EJ, unless there was significant dissent about what has taken place so far. I don't see any great value in us rubber stamping a design and a process that we were not really part of.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Any other comments from members of the committee? I would really like to hear either affirmatively or not, whether or not folks would support taking no action, or whether there is a strong inclination to take action. Ryan.
I'm inclined to agree with Sam and you on this, that rubber stamp is not a useful position, and I'm comfortable with not taking action tonight.
Matt.
I agree with that.
Okay. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Matt. Any other comments or any thoughts at all from members of the committee? Sounds like we're heading in the direction of taking no action. Seeing no other comments, it sounds like we're taking no action. Thank you to the presenters, Mike, Omar, other people who presented. Thanks for the information that you provided and the helpful context that you provided. And Colleen, it sounds like we're going with the option you indicated, which is to say that yes, we've been duly informed, but we're not going to be passing a resolution in any way tonight. Okay, well, that having been said, we will go on to the final item on our agenda for the evening, which is another revocable consent. Revocable consent for a building vault beyond the curb line of 224 West 57th Street. Simon Schinkel, I believe, did diligence on this application. Simon, would you be willing to take a couple minutes and let us know what you learned about the application?
I will take less than a couple minutes. I have 5 sentences.
Okay.
First of all, what's in question is a vault. And as I learned, vault is a term of art, has nothing to do with a bank vault or anything like that. It's just an extension of what amounts to basement space. It is something which is underground, below grade, and will extend out beyond the property line. If you go to the area in question, there's nothing to see. So there's not much due diligence that can be done as far as I could discern. What I sort of brought to this myself in terms of talking to the applicant was that you see a lot of these beyond property line vaults in areas like Soho. They're not really that common, as far as I understand, in the area of Manhattan that we're talking about in this particular case. And the expanded space that the applicant is looking to create is going to be used for utility type of equipment and storage of stuff like that, like gas or electrical equipment. And I don't think there's much more that I can add beyond that.
Okay. Thanks very much, Simon. With that, we'll turn things over to the applicant, Mark Sullivan. And I'll first say thank you for your patience. You've waited 2.5 hours for the opportunity to present to us. So, once again, sorry that the agenda was a longer one tonight and that you ended up at the end of it. But thank you so much for your patience, and we'd love to hear from you now. Mark, if you can hear me, you're muted, but Can
you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Everyone, thank you very much. I always like being at the end of the agenda because I always feel that it's a quicker decision. And as Simon has already mentioned, there's not much controversy involved with this. And with that said, let's go to the drawing. These are the drawings that were presented as part of the revocable consent. As a correction of what Simon mentioned to you, this is an existing building vault that goes out beyond the curb line. And the reason why it is termed a revocable consent is if the building vault went up to the curb line but stayed within the curb line, it's what's called a vault license. And that's typically not a reviewable application. When it goes beyond the curb line, it's a revocable consent, meaning the city could at some point revoke their consent to allow private property within the right-of-way. The items that are within that existing vault beyond the curb line are the Con Edison steam infrastructure and other utilities coming into the building. And the application is to officiate it by virtue of giving consenting for the city to give us a revocable consent, and that will allow the ongoing operation of that vault. The applicant and the building owner at this point, as part of a repair project, one of the bad things about building vaults is that they leak almost constantly. If you have a building roof and it leaks, you send someone up and they fix it. Unfortunately, with building vaults, it's below sidewalks and it's much more difficult to get access to it. In this case here, we have actually two building vaults, a Broadway vault, which is within the curb line that has already been repaired. That was repaired about a year or two ago, and the sidewalk replaced. And this current vault project will remove the lid of this existing vault, the black area you see on West 57th Street and the red area, which is beyond the curb line, strip it down to the vault lid, make structural repairs, put a wonderful new waterproof membrane on top of it, and then recover it again. And as Simon mentioned, there's nothing to see now. And when the project is over, there'll be nothing to see after. And these are just photos of the existing conditions down 57th Street, the plan of it. And there we go. The interior images of the vault, which if you're interested in vaults, I've done many of these applications and each vault is sort of unique in an interesting sort of way. More interesting tends to be in the cast iron district. Here's a plan showing the sidewalk plan, and you see the vault outlined in red at the top of the sheet, the portion that goes beyond the curb line. And this is the plan showing the structures within the vault, meaning the structural elements outlined in red once again. Just another plan with slightly redundant information. And here's the vault section. You see the floor of the vault, which is the lower part, has multiple different levels. Up above, you see the building facade on the left-hand side of the sheet, the sidewalk going out to the curb line, and the portion of the vault outlined in red, which extends beyond the curb. And some other sections showing other vaults on Broadway as well as 57th Street, which tend to project beyond the building line only 4 inches or so. And that's Building Vaults 101.
Okay. Thanks very much. Did you have any other information, or should we turn things over for questions at this point?
There's no additional information.
Okay. I have 1 or 2 questions, and then I'll obviously let the committee ask their questions as well. You mentioned that the vault exists now, coming out to the same point, extending beyond the curb line. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I understand the work that is planned, which is to essentially, as I understand it, rip up the curb and install a new surface below, and then restore the curb. And if I've got that wrong, let me know. But I'm also, so I understand the work that is to be done. I am wondering why a revocable consent is required now, but there isn't an existing one.
Most building vaults, going back to the days of yore, are now grandfathered. And the grandfathering is different depending how far out into the street that the vault goes. If the vault is within the curb line, it's grandfathered, and you can either get a vault license from the City of New York or not do a vault license with the City of New York. It's up to the applicant. And sometimes it depends upon the ownership structure of the building as to whether you want a vault license or not. And a vault license, just for informational purposes, is basically a sort of an agreement with the City of New York as to the uses you'll place within the vault, and the fact that they're granting you a license. So for instance, if you had a building vault below a sidewalk that you were going to rent to a tenant, you would probably want a vault license in order to spell out in black and white what the owner's obligations are and what the tenant's obligations and duties are as it relates to that vault. So it's the fact that the existing building vault goes beyond the curb line that throws it into the revocable consent territory.
Okay, so the vault exists now, but the fact that there's a change being made to it is why it's going from being grandfathered to needing a revocable consent.
Right.
Got it. Thank you. Any other questions from any members of the committee on building vaults? Joel.
One thing you mentioned was that there's Con Ed equipment in there. So is this Con Ed's equipment, or is it equipment of the building that connects to Con Ed's equipment?
This is building owned equipment that takes the Con Edison steam utility being brought into the building, meters it, has shut off valves, etc., before it sends the steam up into the building.
Okay, but it's the building's equipment.
It's the building's equipment, yeah.
So historically, just this isn't really a question, but historically, building owners paid the city for vault using vault space, whether it was under the sidewalk or under the street.
There's a long history of vaults in the City of New York. Back in when the vaults were really popular.
I just wanted to say, so many buildings had vaults. The city used to charge a vault tax, which was basically a license fee for vaults. When when the city started enforcing the vault tax back in the 80s, many building owners bricked up their vaults so they didn't have to pay the vault tax. The city then repealed the vault tax. So just as a point of interest for the committee, this is a free use of public space. I don't know that it changes our outcome, whether we are in favor of this or not, but basically we're giving free public real estate to the owner of this building. So I guess that was a comment, not only the first part was a question. Sorry about that.
And you know more about vault taxes than most people and the vault history. Back in the late 1800s, vaults were just free space that you extended out as far as you could. And the city didn't charge anything back in the 1800s. And a lot of those vaults exist to this day. And you normally only hear about them when you hear about someone falling into a sinkhole or a bus collapsing or a truck collapsing the roof of a vault lid due to, mismanagement and misrepair, because they do deteriorate because they're subject to water infiltration constantly.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Joel. Any other questions from members of the committee? Not seeing any. I'll check and see if there are any comments or questions from members of the public. Also seeing none. Thanks, Mark, for your presentation. We'll take things into our business session for internal conversation within the committee.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any comments from members of the committee on this application? Ryan.
First, thank you to everybody who educated me on vaults, which I now know more about. Thank you. I have no questions or concerns here and would be comfortable supporting this. I will say Joel's point at the end was an interesting one about the free use of public space. And, I'm not advocating that we reach a overarching policy position on this right now, but it could be a point to perhaps put into a resolution as context or otherwise, so that there is some memorialization of that reality in there somewhere. So just wanted to put that out for some consideration or discussion, but otherwise I'm comfortable proceeding here and supporting.
Thanks, Ryan. Pete.
No, I just had a quick question. We're not voting for resolutions just for information purposes, or do they need a resolution? No, right?
I think in this particular case, it does make sense for us to pass a resolution.
Yeah. And it's Colleen, it's always helpful to have a resolution, whether you support this or whether you don't, and what caveats you may have or concerns that you might have. It's always good to have that, just so you know.
Okay.
Yeah. And Pete, I'll say that to me at least, and again, we don't have a lot of precedent for this on the committee for revocable consents, but to me this feels like a different situation than the one that we just heard for One Vanderbilt. This is a concrete action that's coming before us, that's going to take place. It's, as was mentioned, it seems like a very benign change from a grandfathered situation, right, to a pro forma needing a revocable consent for what's essentially going to be, as far as I can tell, a very positive and safe addition. So I tend to agree with Ryan in terms of I have no qualms about this. I have no qualms about supporting it. I think it sort of makes sense to note that it is a particular situation where someone is making free use of public property. It has been the grandfathered situation for a very long time. If it was someone getting new public benefit from public space, I think we would probably reasonably ask, what is the community getting in return? This is a situation where it's been the grandfathered situation for decades, if not.
Right. I agree.
Okay. Thanks, Pete. So far, it sounds like the consensus is more or less to approve with some of these comments and caveats in our resolution. Joel's also nodding his head, I can see. Any other comments from any members of the committee? Not seeing any, I will entertain a motion if someone would like to make one. Such as a motion to approve with the comments that we've mentioned.
move to approve the application, including the comments shared in the discussion just now.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second, and so we will take it to a vote. Clark.
Yes.
Dowson.
Yes.
Goldman.
Yes.
Gushow.
Yes.
Hartman.
Yes.
Pawson is gone. Raybar.
Yes.
Stern.
Yes.
BJ.
Yes.
Simon.
Yes.
Pete.
Yes.
Whalen.
Yes.
Hykalis.
Yes.
Maxman.
Yes.
Levy.
Yes.
And I am a yes. So the motion passes. The motion to approve passes. Thank you very much, Mark, for teaching us about vaults and vault history. As was mentioned earlier, this will go before the full board in about 2 weeks' time, at which point it'll be voted on by the full board. And you're, of course, welcome to attend and speak during the public session if you are so inclined.
Thank you, everyone.
With no further business, that concludes our meeting for the evening. Thank you to all the presenters and applicants tonight for your patience. Thank you to members of the committee. I know this was a long one, and I thank you very much for your patience. It is very much appreciated. I hope, and thanks, Colleen, for your help as usual as well.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
Everybody, please have a good evening. Thanks very much.
Good night, everyone. Have a good evening.
Good
Good night.